Hi, welcome to Up Your Nerd Cred. Did you used to know everything that was happening in the Marvel and DC universes? Did finding out that some superheroes are from Marvel and some are from DC blow your mind? Has keeping track of everything that's happening there and then realizing that we're only talking about the comics universes and not the cinematic ones, and that all these different universes are with their own multiversal crises has gotten a little bit out of hand? Well, don't worry. Up Your Nerd Cred is here to talk about the gods cosplaying as men, the men cosplaying as gods, and how much the cinematic universes are actually leaving out. At the end of each episode, you'll hopefully know a little more than you did and can up your nerd cred. I'm your casual nerd host, Cece. I was thinking about the phrase jack of all trades and master of none, and how weird it is that people only use like the first half of the phrase, actually. Because it completely changes the meaning. Phrase is jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than master of one. Being able to do a few things, even if it's not like, expert level, makes you a more useful person than people really give you credit for. Solid Swiss Army knife kind of vibe. And in a way, I think it makes you actually just as cool as everyone else, and maybe even cooler and perfectly normal and not a dork. Please save me.
And I'm your perpetually exhausted blue elf who just spent 3 days running around a mansion in Minneapolis like a strung-out Disney princess at Disneyland. Am Diaz. For those of you who haven't caught on, I just got back from the Uncanny Experience, and it has been about 2 days since I got back into town, and I am still tired.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you spend all of your time in blue paint. He spent so much time in blue paint. I was pretty certain that Mystique actually kidnapped him at some point because of the amount of blue paint that he was in. But, what this does mean is that he ain't new to it. He's true to it. And also, he's our resident expert nerd.
Expert.
So I'll be asking him all kinds of burning questions each week. And, I think the first question that we should ask, though, is what are we nerding out about this week? And now, just a reminder, listeners, you can nerd out about all kinds of things. It does not just have to be heroes and villains. Con season shenanigans are fully afoot. Some Bean Dad just milkshake ducked all over the internet. I don't know. And there are people who rank that the BS that the 6 wives of Henry VIII had to put up with incorrectly. So, what are you nerding out about this week?
I'm sorry, Bean Dad just milkshake ducked? I know it's off the internet for a little bit, but okay.
So, because the milkshake duck you have is like the, everybody loves the milkshake duck. 5 minutes later, we regret to inform you that the milkshake duck is racist. So there's someone who's like, oh, look at me, I'm super cute on the internet. Bean Dad. 5 minutes later, Bean Dad is a milkshake duck who is racist or something.
I'm sorry, my brain just disengaged there, because I really have no idea what you're talking about.
Actually,
and I was disconnected almost the entire weekend.
Damn. Okay.
And apparently that is enough for me to completely lose touch with culture. I just got back, as I mentioned earlier, from the Uncanny Experience, which, as some of our listeners know, is an immersive X-Men event that takes place in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We just finished off our junior year, and it was crazy. We had such an amazing time. The entire event, like I said, was immersive, so we had a huge number of cosplayers who were the official X-Men. We were all walking around in character, funny accents, badass personalities.
Nice.
Some rioters, in fact.
Well,
giving a shout out to Scott Free, our Quentin Quire.
Ooh.
Who decided to ransack Professor Xavier's office during the Saturday night Krakoa party. We had...
Pretty sure you're not supposed to do that.
Well, it's Quentin Quire. That is his default state.
Fair.
But, we had a great time. So many amazing cosplayers dressed up like Cyclops, Jean Grey, Wolverine, Storm, Psylocke, Multiple Man. The list goes on, and we had, different classes. So we had Storm's horticulture class. We had a class dedicated to romance and love interests. Panels with the voice actors of the X-Men Evolution series celebrating their 25th anniversary. We also had Tyler Mane, who was Sabretooth in both X-Men, the first movie, and Deadpool and Wolverine. And all of them are so sweet, so nice. Can't say nearly enough nice things about them. Also,
I haven't heard you say any of the nice things that these people are coming onto our podcast. So, like, what happened there? Are they not coming? Oh, you're so busy being like actually like a good cosplayer and like staying in character. That's okay.
yeah,
Next
it was
year,
really
I'm sure
hard.
they'll hear about us.
It was really hard to name drop the podcast while talking with them when you're doing a thick German accent and having to run around to different events. Because
That's fair.
I love this event so much, but it keeps us busy. Like, I burned so many calories just running around that place. And happy to my drama class. We had a little bit of a rough start, but we've gotten nothing but good responses. The people who performed were fantastic. A special shout out to one of our guests who was helping me do readings, as well as our opening performer, Tiffy Starchild, who many of you might know online for her Villains PR series. Jen and Tiffy were so immensely helpful. Jen was doing the readings, and Tiffy started up the crowd. She's got great energy and just got everyone really pumped.
That's really cool. Well, I did not go to Uncanny Experience, but what I did get to do was go to Baby Days. Alamo Drafthouse has Baby Days, and it is everything. I love Baby Days so much. Well, I'm not nerding out about stuff as cool as you are, but what I am nerding out about is Baby Days at Alamo Drafthouse. I don't understand who it is who first told them that new parents actually want to see movies too, but whoever did that, they deserve a round of applause. I got to see Superman, and I got to take my kid with me, and it was very cute.
Aww.
He had a good time, and also I got
Did
to
you
actually
watch
see
any of it?
He did, actually. He sat on my lap and you walked the thing, but because it was Baby Days, they're like very specifically like, hey, if you don't like crying babies, like go ahead and leave. So while I did shush him when he got like a little bit babbly, he clapped and cheered at all the right spots, and he had like a really good time.
Aww.
And he's about to turn 2. He's almost 2, and like I don't understand how I, as a mom, have been able to get him to. Anyway, I'm really excited about the fact that I have a 2-year-old, and the fact that despite having a 2-year-old, I can still see movies. It's the best. So,
I hope you enjoyed Superman. I still have not seen it myself because unfortunately it had to come out the same week that I was going to try Uncanny.
Well, I'm sure if you see it this weekend, then you can sit there being part of the second week of bounce, right?
You have no idea how hard it is trying to avoid spoilers. I already know I already know about the surprise appearance at the end, but let's be honest, we all kind of saw that coming.
Let's say anything about it. The important part is that Krypto is a very good boy, and that adoptions have gone up like 500% because of Krypto. Even
Krypto's a hero.
Krypto is kind of a lot more CGI than I might have expected for a puppy, but I'm really excited about the part that like more puppies are getting adopted, though. That's what matters.
I think Krypto was 100% CGI. I don't think they had a real dog for that.
I choose to believe that it was at some point like the soul of a real puppy somewhere, because otherwise, what do you mean Krypto's not real? I can't. Krypto
was 100% based on James Gunn's own dog.
Yes, but I want to pet Krypto.
So pet James Gunn's dog.
Well, we need to get a little bit more famous for that before he invites us over to his house. But I promise, if we ever go to James Gunn's house and I get to pet his dog, I will 100%.
Kira?
Yeah. Yeah, no, Krypto is absolutely the best boy, and even if he is CGI, he's still real in my heart. And also, there's a whole bunch of other good boys and girls who have gotten adopted, and I think that's what matters. So beyond that, though, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back to Up Your Nerd Cred. Welcome back. All right, so the question burning me up this week is, wait, what age are we talking about? So I know that we've been focusing a lot lately on the impact of the CCA, and I wanted to take some time to actually talk about like the different superhero comics ages. The CCA is impactful because it does provide some framework for where some stories would be presented, but
quick thing, for those who are episode, CCA stands for the Comic Code Authority.
But yes, that's important.
Yeah, it was a set of guidelines set up during the McCarthy era to control the comics, to make sure that they were considered appropriate for the youth of America.
Well, yes, true. So the goofy villains like Kite Man that we talked about last week were created to satisfy the the Pearl Clutchers, but they also exist at the same comic shops these days as the works of Todd McFarlane and Alan Moore, and both of whom have made their names for themselves with amazing graphic novels that should not be shown to kids. So a lot has changed within our general culture in the past 75 years or so. The various generational changes and moods are really highlighted in the 4 or 5 generally accepted ages of comic books. Now, while we aren't necessarily doing a full proper introduction of all of the characters in this episode, we are going to start with defining the time frame of the ages, and then we're going to go from there. So we're starting with 1938 to 1956 is considered the golden age of comics. So this was kicked off with the introduction of our favorite Man of Steel, Superman. 1956 to 1970 is considered the silver age of comics. And so this is when there's renewed interest in the superhero genre. And like it boosted the popularity of the comics, but then the Comics Code Authority, the CCA, started curtailing some of the stories that we could see. 1970 to...
Go ahead. Let's give context. So by curtailing the stories, there was things where certain kinds of violence weren't allowed to be demonstrated. Villains were not allowed to be portrayed in any shape or form as acceptable or understandable or relatable. Anything queer, LGBTQ, was completely banned. This would also put limits on things as simple as monsters of certain kinds, or horror, violence, or crime. So true crime stories were not allowed anymore, nor were horror stories about zombies or vampires, that kind of thing.
What happens, though, after that is eventually a bit of a revolt, and we have the Bronze Age. And in this page, it's less a revolt and more the main distributors of comics have lost a significant amount of their power, and a lot more underground comics started to gain prevalence and gain credibility and a foothold in the comic space, which does mean that 1985 until now has been deemed the modern age, which at about 40 years so far is the longest age, and does include like the shift to like digital comics, a lot of reimaginings of the characters that we're familiar with, and the introduction of so much diversity that fake nerds don't necessarily realize that Ironheart wasn't a weird race sex swap of Iron Man, but a full character in her own right. Also, Ironheart has been out for nearly a month now, so if you haven't watched it, boo!
Agreed.
Anyway, there are arguments that the modern age could be split around 2005, 2010-ish, but generally speaking, since 1985, it's largely been considered a modern age kind of thing.
Well, the thing is, back then with the original modern age, golden age, silver age, all that stuff, you could tell the distinctive changes that happened across all books.
Mm-hmm.
Because all comic codes were kind of adherent to that specific thing. Modern stories since about the 1990s, I would argue, the companies have become more isolated in how they approach things. Mm-hmm. So it's no longer split up into a general era of comics, but more what is happening at that company at that specific time. It's the reason why DC, for example, since the 1985s, has had stuff like the pre-crisis, post-crisis, Infinite Crisis, the New 52, the Rebirth era. So it's now started becoming into subgenres of the modern age storytelling.
See, yeah, I really think that like splitting it in parts makes sense. If nothing else, but for the fact that I think that during the 90s and 2000s is when we had a lot of like some have referred to the modern age as the dark age of comics because there's a lot more edgy comics and things happening in that time frame. And if you think of the things that have happened, like the major stories that have happened in the last 40 years or so, that time span does not seem to comport with like the large quantity of time span of those kind of things that we've had before. And it's weird that it's all in one thing, in part because, and this is my personal opinion, I think that once we really got into digital and when the cinematic universes actually start to kick off and actually become a consistent thing and not just a lot of one-shot movies, it really changed a lot of the game. There's a lot of able to be pretty well versed, generally speaking, on what kind of things are happening with the superhero world by virtue of the fact of if they've seen all of the Marvel movies, they know a significant amount about Captain America, about the Winter Soldier, about Wasp and Hawkeye. So it's worth splitting
Well,
it up.
as much as you can, considering how drastic the MCU has adjusted these characters from the source material.
Fair. But even with that, you have even if you consider the fact that we have the way that Nick Fury was redrawn as Samuel L. Jackson and then turning that into a means of getting Samuel L. Jackson into the movies, I think that's the thing that that's something that you're not going to necessarily see in, like, for example, the Silver Age. So Eartha Kitt and Julie Newmar were amazing as Catwoman, but I don't necessarily think that they would get the same kind of reception and setup as Catwomen as characters are in the Marvel Cinematic Universes.
Hard to say. With social media and all that stuff, how things flow goes differently.
That's fair. So let's think about like some of the different ages. So as we're going through them, let's talk about like the golden age heroes. Okay, so this is where you're gonna have like your Superman, your Batman, your Wonder Woman, your Captain America. These are the big names that we have known about since before we all came out of the womb in many ways. A lot of these heroes had like they were fighting in World War One. They were explicitly fighting Nazis in a lot of ways. You have Lee and Kirby and Simon and Schuster. Like these are names that probably even non-nerds amongst us have heard of just by virtue of the fact of they were so prolific. Like they created some of the characters that you have known about even if you were not into any of like the nerdverse. They have a lot of bright, bold costumes that realistically silly would look a little bit silly in the real world.
And it was especially interesting because a lot of them took place in very noir stories because before superheroes were really a thing, there was the mystery men stories, which were a lot more dark and street level crimes and that kind of thing. And so even though you had like Superman running around, you still had like the Shadow and the Phantom, and they were like dark colors, dark stories. So it was kind of interesting how back then those kind of stories are kind of how modern stories are in some ways too.
I will also note though that the Phantom and the Shadow, both of them had cinematic adventures, which is how I actually learned a lot about them in my youth.
But yeah, they were the result of certain movies like the Tim Burton Batman movies. And so every studio were trying to scoop up any property they could for cheap to turn into the next Batman, which resulted in The Shadow and The Question, because those characters were barely even used and were hardly remembered. So they were kind of cheap for the studios to get a hold of.
And yet The Spirit didn't get a movie made until, what, the mid-2010s? Nobody wanted The Spirit?
No, The Spirit got an early one in the 90s.
In the early 90s? I don't remember one then.
Yeah, Billy Zane played him, didn't he?
No, Billy Zane played the Phantom.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, The Spirit.
Oh, yeah, no. Oh, yeah, no. The
Spirit had like the hat and the red tie and like the black. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the thing was, there was a few attempts at doing him earlier on, but they never really got off the ground. I think there was a pilot that they filmed or something. But yeah,
Howard the Duck also made out with Marty McFly's mom at one point, so
Howard the Duck will remain the first Marvel character to get a movie in modern cinema.
You know what? We all need to start out with something. You got to start out with something. You can't become great if you don't start out with something. But speaking of things that are great, what I will say is that James Gunn did note that in Superman 25, part of the reason that Supes was wearing like the shorts and everything is in part the Golden Age throwback, and part of it is because Clark would want the kids to be less intimidated by him. And this is not a spoiler. This is something that they talked about in interviews, and you can see the picture of Superman with his little shorts on.
That's 100% the character. That was one of the things that the DCEU Snyder films failed to remember about Superman, is that Superman doesn't want people to be afraid of him. He doesn't want to be Batman. So part of the thing that was interesting about him creating his costume, as opposed to having one pre-made for him by Kryptonian technology, is the fact that his mom and him made the costume to be bright and colorful and to be able to draw in people and make them feel at ease. Because a man who has those kinds of powers but dresses that silly, it's kind of hard to, be afraid of him, because it's like, he really is just a big Boy Scout, so he's going to want everyone to be comfortable around him.
I have to say that the part where every time someone like compliments him on his suit and he's just like, thanks, my mom made it. I'm just like, you are such a giant dork. I completely understand why Lois is just like, I want to be so cynical, but you're such a sweetheart. I can't stop myself.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite lines from the latest Superman TV show, Superman and Lois. Just that scene of a kid saying, "Nice costume, thanks. My mom made it." He has the biggest smile on his face when he says it.
Oh yeah, no, they're very cute. Superman and Lois. I really enjoyed the show more than I expected to. I'm not gonna lie. Because again, like we've all said that like the DC universe is kind of touch and go, but you know when they hit really well.
They just have to remember who these characters are and not try to turn them into Batman.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair.
Anxious and always.
As we're talking about the some of the different heroes, though, we are moving into the Silver Age, where we're talking about heroes like the Flash and Spider-Man and Martian Manhunter and Fantastic Four. There's a lot more of a focus on kind of like science fiction aspects things more than like magic that they had in the previous age. This is also like when TV is actually starting to impact comics and such. So we have like Camp Batman, that Eartha Kitt and Julie Newmar. We have Burt Ward. We have Caesar Romero. We have, oh, who's that one other guy who played the title character? Some goober. I think he moved to Maine or something, Massachusetts.
I just did not really want to acknowledge Family Guy much.
Yeah, no, but sometimes you have to.
Fair enough. Adam West, wherever you are, you lived a wild and crazy life, and we miss you, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Along
So
with
during
Eartha Kitt and Julie Newmar. Oh, Julie Newmar's still around, I think. But Eartha Kitt
though.
passed. Yeah. And Caesar
Eartha
Romero.
Kitt, they asked Eartha Kitt about compromising with a man, and she's just like, why? Why would I do that? And I'm just like, correct.
Yeah, no, she was an icon, and we miss her every day.
Every day. And also, it was very silly to have Batman running with a bomb on his head. Like, that is probably one of the best gifts of. They didn't intend for it to be that, but it was absolutely hilarious. I loved it. But yeah, I mean, like within the Silver Age, we have like the situation where like a lot of American economic power growing. So the hegemony, it's easy for me to say, the hegemonic American way to a certain extent is being pumped out into the rest of the world, which means that we're only allowed to show an idealized America. We're not allowed to acknowledge that America has people who are queer. We're not allowed to acknowledge that America has like a racism problem. We're not allowed to acknowledge that people have mental illness, that people have substance abuse issues. We're not allowed to talk about any of that.
And this was the age of the McCarthy era and the introduction of the Comic Code Authority, which, like I said, they had to prove that America was the best at anything. You know, they were going through the idea of science had really picked up because we were getting into the space race and all that stuff, so that was where suddenly characters like Green Lantern went from being like a magic-based character to a sci-fi alien story. The Fantastic Four were space explorers. The Flash was a super scientist and stuff like that. But during this era, it was also, we have to stay to strict social rules of order, and that's also created a lot of issues where, you know, diversity of any kind was very limited for the longest time. And it was interesting because writers were very tied down by these rules. They had so many complaints that you'd hear from writers who were around at that time was that they had limitation on what they could do because of the Comic Code Authority. All the stories they wanted to tell, darker stories, more mature stories, were not allowed. But they also got to be fun and creative. They got to do the silliest stories. And, I mean, Batman turns into a baby. Batman turns into a gorilla. Superman gets rainbow powers out of its fingertips that shoot out mini Supermen. And because of the fact that they could be silly and try to like do different storytelling, it also got them to create new characters. Supergirl and Batgirl, which unfortunately they were considered distaff counterparts of Batman and Superman, were amazing characters with complex stories and their own, you know, adventures, and they've become as iconic as their male predecessors.
We got plenty of Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane, and now we're just like, okay, yeah, it's cute that you have Superman or whatever, but where is Lois? Like, somebody has to cuss the Man of Steel out.
Yeah, and Lois got her own comic series. I mean, granted, they really played for the longest time on the idea that she was just obsessed with getting to marry Superman, because women be barren, they gotta get married. But the thing was, they still had fun with Lois. She was crafty, she was conniving, especially if you like look at some of her books from Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane. The artist at the time, I'm blanking on his name, drew some of the most hilariously unhinged Lois Lanes. Mm-hmm. But at the core, she was still the Lois Lane that we always loved. She was smart, she was tenacious, she would get the story by whatever means necessary.
Considering the fact that Lois Lane in the Christopher Reeve movie is just like, what if I throw myself out of a window or jump into Niagara Falls?
Yeah,
Because I know that you're Superman, you're gonna save me.
No, there's an issue of Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane where she literally jumps off a cliff to have Superman catch her so he will take her to work.
You know what? They didn't have Uber back then.
Yeah.
Uber back then, and sometimes like the mass transit is a mess. There are ways to do something about that, I guess. But yeah, I mean, like the Silver Age is 1956 to 1970. So you are moving really from a very idealized post-war era to really moving deep through the various civil rights era where you have, people of color who are demanding to be recognized. You have women who are saying, hey, we don't want to just be in the house. You have the queer community saying, hey, you can't just sit there and label us all as mentally ill because we're not. And there's a whole lot happening over this time frame so that like by the time 1970 kind of comes along, they've gone through a lot. It's really time for a big change. And like the hippie movement has kind of largely started to go its way because the Summer of Love is passed and everything in 69.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this is around the time that everyone really became disillusioned with the American ideal because we entered into Vietnam and the Korean War, stuff like that. And these kinds of issues made youth culture in particular really start to distrust the way the country was being run and the way adults were. Mm-hmm. And writers started reflecting that. They started to talk about the issues that kids and teenagers were actually dealing with and actually being more, aware that things are not this perfect ideal, everything gets resolved by the end of the story, sort of things.
Yeah. So the Bronze Age heroes actually are, there's a few of them that are like, I feel like are really reflective of kind of the sort of desire to try to make sense of like where people are like in like because it's like a post world war era to a certain extent, like 1970 to 1985, and that is more Cold War. That's a lot more espionage. That's a lot of who's looking over your shoulder and that sort of thing. So we have Conan the Barbarian, we have Red Sonja, we have Swamp Thing. Like these are like aggressively just like muscly characters, but the Swamp Thing is like actively terrifying at times. During this time frame, though, we have like Jack Kirby left Marvel, and that sent ripples through the industry. Superman got completely nerfed. Iron Man had to deal with his alcoholism because, as we've discussed multiple times, the Demon in a Bottle storyline was around this time frame, and Green Goblin killed Gwen Stacy, and we do not forgive him for that.
And arguably, Gwen Stacy's death was the catalyst that kind of pushed comics past the comic code authority in some ways, because it was rare that the female love interest of a superhero could get murdered like that. I mean, that may have happened back during the Golden Age, before the comic code authority was a thing. But back then, a lot of stories were one and done, so you wouldn't really go on. They wouldn't be ongoing characters all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like with Gwen Stacy's death and a lot of these other stories, things changed drastically for comics. One of the most, like you said, Iron Man's Demon in a Bottle, he gives into alcoholism, and you see him self-destructing, which, to be true, he's always kind of was self-destructing, but back when he first came out, it was suave and debonair and just like, oh, he's just eccentric. By this time, it's like, no, this guy might kill himself doing what he's doing. Then we got stuff like Green Arrow sidekick Speedy giving into drugs and doing heroin, and that honestly is one of the most traumatic stories because you see this kid sidekick who people followed along with Robin and Kid Flash and Wonder Girl, and you see him descend. You see him completely break down because he's essentially felt abandoned by Green Arrow and he gives into drug use. And you see him going through like detoxing, trying to go cold turkey without the drugs and all that stuff. And Green Arrow is not there. Green Arrow throws him out. And you see Black Canary being the one who stands by his side. And this is not a story that would have been told 10, 15 years prior.
Yeah. So I mean, after that point though, I mean, the CCA really had to relax their rules after a point. Like, yeah, so like, okay, like, well, maybe if the drugs are shown like negatively the whole time, then fine, we'll accept this. But
Well, it was
Stanley's pushing stuff out that they're just like, you can't do this. And just in general, they have to grow with the time. You can't just sit there and be the bubblegum from the 1950s anymore.
well, I mean, the Comic Code Authority was implemented by the editors at the comics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So how fast and everything varied on different books and stuff like that, and different editors in this thing. So,
Mhm.
like the editor who's working on books like Batman and Green Arrow and stuff, they really laxed the things on that because those characters were more street level heroes. So it was easier to tell those kinds of stories. But Batman, for example, still had more limitations than Green Arrow did because Batman was more mainstream thanks to the Adam West series. So they were never going to show Robin having a drug problem. They
That's
were,
fair.
yeah, but they could do it with Green Arrow because as popular as he was, he still wasn't Batman as much as he
Yeah.
tried to be.
Which is fair. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really hard to duplicating Batman is very much like a lightning in a bottle situation that I'm sure that many people have gone for.
Yeah, and it's like Marvel too tried to go for those storytelling things. Norman Osborn's son, Harry Osborn, the Green Goblin, he was going through drug issues as well. He was dealing with substance abuse and whatnot, and that was a subplot in the Spider-Man stories. So it was around that time that they were really realizing that certain topics could not be ignored,
Yeah.
especially because of the fact that the audience who was reading the comics when they were 10 might have still been reading the comics in their teens.
You have to really kind of grow with your audience to a certain extent. You can't always keep them stuck in the past, which is why you should allow Peter Parker to grow up, you cowards.
Let him grow up and let him be married. He's so much more interesting as a father than he is by himself these days.
He really is. Like, I loved him chasing after May in Spider-Verse so much. Give me Peter Parker who's chasing after a toddler. Are you kidding? That's so relatable.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Read the current Ultimate Spider-Man book. That's great. Peter being a father. His son somehow got a hold of the Venom symbiote, and his daughter is just adorable. And
I have to try to make sure that I have mounted all of my furniture to the wall in the next couple of weeks because my child has started deciding that he wants to climb on everything. Did discover him on the counter the other day. Was not pleased by it. Granted, he has like a little Montessori tower thing, so he can climb up and get part of the way. But yeah, no, he figured out how to get on the counter. Anyway, not important. What is important is the fact that as we're looking in this general time frame, though, like in like the late 70s, early 80s, we're really post the first civil rights era. So there's also a huge increase in comics diversity. So you have like Falcon and Black Panther and Luke Cage and Storm and Cyborg. And yes, I did specifically go out of my way to try to figure out that characters that don't necessarily have primarily lightning powers because black characters either have black or lightning powers a lot. That's neither here nor there. But Black Panther also is not going to get ignored. So there's that. But like
well,
also
Black
in
Panther was, I'm pretty sure, before uh, the he was still, I think, Silver Age. I think he was introduced in like the 1960s.
let me double check because I thought that he was, let's see, Black Panther introduction. Da-da-da. That is, no, that is the Black Panther movie. Black Panther first appearance was 1966, so I guess you were right.
Yeah, I thought so because I remember that when he was introduced, it was still while Jack Kirby was working on the books. So Jack Kirby's art style is very distinctive, and I vividly remember that issue of the Fantastic Four where Black Panther invites him over so he can basically attack them in Wakanda to test his mettle against them.
Okay, so he came out in the 60s. The important part is that there are a lot more black and brown
Yes.
characters that are being introduced. We have a lot more women who are being introduced. We have like who we have like as like the focus of everything.
Well, that's the thing. It's like Jack Kirby and Stan Lee in particular were very adamant that they wanted to have more diversity in their comics at the time. But, editors and all that stuff were always like pushing back against them. And that was a big reason why Black Panther was created by Stan Lee and them, because they were like, we need a black character. We need a prominent hero because we got way too much white stuff going over here.
We can't just have Franklin sitting at the folding chair at Charlie Brown's table. By the way, if you look at Charlie Brown's Thanksgiving with Franklin, he's sitting at a folding chair where everybody else has like regular chairs. It's kind of weird,
rude.
but okay.
Those guys don't get invited to the barbecue, do they? Or
it's the cookout, and no, baby, you might not be able to come either. Sorry.
I know I can't come. I know I can't come.
Yeah.
But to be fair, it's like I'm not.
Yeah, that's fine, but you know, you have plenty of brujeria and stuff that you guys could access. You know, it's very different thing. You've got your own magic, I've got my magic. The important part is that we're not letting the remix of the world come and steal our magic.
Agreed.
There we go. So anyway, what does matter though, like cycling back, is that there's a lot of situations where like we have black and brown characters really coming to the fore, and while we're not quite at the point of acknowledging queerness really there are some changes that are things happening. Something that I do think was pretty cool though was that because Archie comics really were like blowing up as well, they were like designed to bring in some female readership, which helped like, you know, work with like the comic book shops, which led to some of these independent authors getting like, you know, a bit more work on the scene. And then it basically led to a point where we could have multiversal crises get out of hand.
Mm-hmm. To be fair, I mean, this whole multiverse stuff got started in the Silver Age, but by the time of the Bronze Age, yeah, even DC was just looking at their stuff and going, all right, we need to wipe the board clear.
Which is the reason why we have Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is largely accepted as the end of the Bronze Age because it's shaking up and like it's resetting a lot of the lore of the previous ages. It's streamlining the canonicity, easy for me to say. Yes, of the origins and rogues galleries of a lot of our heroes and things like that, which
for those
does honestly make life easier for us all to a certain extent.
Yeah. For those who maybe didn't read it or see our different episodes, the Crisis on Infinite Earths was a massive company-wide event where DC decided they need to wipe the slate clean. So what they did was they created this massive event that took years to do, where every single character that they had ever created from the Golden Age until that point were part of this major story where all universes were being wiped out and they were trying to survive. And eventually the heroes battled against a creature called the Anti-Monitor. Everything got kind of destroyed and then recondensed into a single Earth. So they found a way to try to fit in decades of continuity but make it all more streamlined in one Earth. So there wasn't like Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 12. It was
how'd that work
Prime
out?
Earth.
Long term.
Well, in theory it was a good idea. The problem was they tried to keep a lot of characters that they loved, but those characters no longer fit in with the continuity. And that started creating issues about how the timeline worked because things did not fit. So you had complications like Hawkman and Donna Troy, whose histories made absolutely no sense whatsoever. You had issues where you did not know if Superman had ever been Superboy, or was he not? No, he wasn't. He was just fresh on Earth. Okay, but then how does the Legion of Superheroes exist? And so on and so forth. And like Wonder Woman's origins got completely rewritten where she was no longer a World War II hero, but instead she just arrived on Man's World in the 90s. But they still wanted to tell World War II stories, so they had to find a way to explain it. And then they decided, hey, it's her mom who was in World War II. She just never told us that she used to like bum around. And it's like, oh, but she didn't because it was time travel. And yeah.
You know what? Attempting to try to put all of this stuff together it very much is the scene at the end of Loki season 2, which has been out long enough that it is not a spoiler at this point. But the loom keeps overloading because there's so many different things. Like every time they try to streamline it and sort of make a singular situation, it still ends up exploding because there's so many different what ifs and there's so much of the comics world that works basically on the many worlds hypothesis.
Oh yeah, but the funniest thing is, as complicated as Crisis on Infinite Earths still was easier to follow than the New 52 got to be. Because at least with Crisis on Infinite Earths, they tried to make sure they got as many of the characters sorted as they could.
Mm-hmm.
With the New 52, they just focused on the primary heroes, and everyone else, they just kept, like, they didn't know, and it didn't seem like they always cared. The continuity was supposed to be. And even then, it was like, Superman, for example, we had no idea if Doomsday ever happened. We didn't know if he died or not. But they would reference it, but then they would kind of say that didn't happen, so...
Is New 52 the one where I was disapproving of Starfire's outfit because I'm like, man,
Yes, it was.
there are some clothings required?
Yeah, that was the one as Linkara on Top the Fourth Wall, I think, said they turned her into a sexy goldfish or something like that. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah,
But
kind of.
because she implied that she had no memory of any of her past relationships with members of the Titans who unfortunately didn't exist, but she still
So she was
worked
born
with them.
sexy yesterday?
It's kind of, it was very confusing because it implied that she had no memory of, like, Dick Grayson, who was the love of her life.
Mm-hmm.
And they had it to where she was just very, like, Starfire was always sexually liberated, but they made her to where she was disengaged and just sexual because she was bored. Yeah, it's like, it was implied that she just slept around a lot. Like, she immediately sleeps with Speedy shortly after meeting him. And
The only thing that I could think to justify that would be a situation where she's just like, I don't think that we're able to crossbreed, so, like, we are able to do things, but even still,
well,
anyway,
her species
I don't
are able to
like that
crossbreed
version of
with humans, so
Starfire.
not
I
many
think
people
it's
did.
disrespectful.
Not many people did, and eventually they started to rework her to retcon that kind of stuff that was going on. Eventually, they got her to where they started writing her more like her cartoon counterpart, like she just got off the boat kind of personality.
Yeah, I like her being a little bit just like confusion. I don't like her just being just like, oh, I must throw like my cooch everywhere. That is not like shaking hands, ma'am.
Yeah,
And
a lot of
even on her planet, I don't think it was just like shaking hands. Free
lot of
love
people
is good, but shaking hands is not the same thing.
a lot of people ended up dropping comics, especially people who were like fans of the Teen Titans cartoon,
Mm-hmm.
because of the fact that they did not like the way the characters were being portrayed.
Yeah, no. I did not like it. I do not care for it. But that's okay because as we're sitting here talking about like the TV shows and things like that, it means that we're moving in more towards the modern age. And so we're talking about like the kind of heroes that come up here, like more of like Watchmen. We have John Constantine, who we've talked about. We have Spawn.
It's like Watchmen, John Constantine, the adult stories, but a lot of these characters were still not allowed to be part of the mainstream.
Yeah.
Watchmen was its own, like, subgenre. John Constantine was part of the Vertical line, and he was rarely allowed to cross over into the main DC stories.
Yeah, no, I mean, we did talk about him previously about how John Constantine was, I'm sorry, John Constantine. Constantine is a conqueror. Constantine is a sorcerer.
Both kind of work because they've used both for both pronunciations.
I've gotten sassed too many times about calling him Constantine as though he's a conqueror. Constantine is a conqueror. Constantine is a sorcerer.
I getcha, but I'm just saying, like, the live action version that they did for the CW shows, it was Constantine. And then the Sandman series, it was Constantine. And the DC animated movies, I think, still say Constantine.
Okay, great. You know what? Then all the time that I got like sassed after the Keanu Reeves movie came out is just gone now. Great. All of that complaining that people gave me whenever that one came out, I was like,
yeah, no. Believe me,
pronounced it wrong.
This isn't. It's the same thing with Ra's al Ghul. Is it Ra's al Ghul or Ra's al Ghul? Who can say? It all depends on who's doing the dialogue at that time.
Fair. So, as we have like the modern age, though, it's sometimes also known as the Dark Age because, like I said, we have like a lot of stories that are darker and grittier than previous ages. Like we have a lot of like the dark things happening in that time, and anti-heroes start to get shine. Although, should anti-heroes get shine? I mean, technically they are bad, but they're not.
Well,
good.
I mean,
their
this is playing.
D&D alignment is weird.
Well, it's like I say. The thing is with Dark Age quotation marks is they were trying to go for grittier storytelling because teenagers were more gritty, I guess you could say. At least that's how they viewed it. The music that kids listened to, the movies that were coming out, Terminator, Predator, movies like that, where it's a lot more violent, organized. And with anti-heroes, they were popular at the time. You had your Dirty Harrys, your Arnold Schwarzenegger in almost any single movie that he did.
Fair. Even though
Because
apparently he sounds like a hick in Austria.
yeah, because a lot of people kind of got the idea that being that truth, justice, and a better tomorrow was dorky. It was corny. It was lame. So it's like they start giving focus to characters like the Punisher, who is kills the criminals. He doesn't let them. And it was a
We should
very
probably tell the boys in blue that the Punisher is not on their side, but that's a whole other conversation.
Oh yeah, but that's the thing. It's just like there was a lot more focus on trying to make these characters darker and gritty. It bled into other heroes as well. Batman, for example, they had him replaced with a dark and gritty version of Batman.
Yeah.
Paul Valley turned the Batsuit into an armored monstrosity with claws and sharp blade capes and stuff like that. And this was also the era of like the death of Superman, who was one of the superhero, the beginning of the entire genre, and they murdered him in cold blood against a dark and gritty rock monster being alien.
That was genetically engineered to every time it lost a fight to somehow come back
stronger.
Able to
So this was an era where no one was safe. Batman got his back broken. Superman got killed. Wonder Woman was killed and replaced with another Amazon or with her mother and stuff like that.
Yeah. So this is also the time frame too that we also have villains are starting to get backstories and pathos. Is the Joker just pathologically evil, or is he actually mentally ill? Is it Galactus's fault that he's out here eating planets? I mean, Dr. Doom loves his mama.
Yeah, this was around the time that the Comic Code Authority, while it still was kind of latching on, it had not fully died. It was on death's door at this point. Yeah. And yeah, they were finally allowed to start making the villains somewhat sympathetic. I mean, we always had characters like Magneto who got sympathy and character development starting in the late 1980s. But we started seeing it with a lot of other characters. Joker, like you mentioned, in The Killing Joke, which, is a great story, but also controversial. Mm. This was originally supposed to be an Elseworld story. It was not supposed to be mainstream. But it was a story that delved into, is there some sympathy to the Joker?
Yeah. And why is he the way that he is?
Exactly. And we got some stories where we got some sympathy for these villains. And, this storytelling would follow with certain characters. Like the Flash's villains in particular got a lot of sympathetic development because of the fact that they were not treated like Batman villains. Mm-hmm. They weren't killers. They were just thieves and kookies and stuff like that.
Yeah. We
got development over years, and this would lead into stuff like Batman the Animated Series, where the villains did get sympathetic backstories. In the early 90s, this was still part of the early mid part of the modern age. Batman the Animated Series has every single villain to where you understand their motives for the most part.
Yeah.
You've got Mr. Freeze, the loss of his wife. You've got Poison Ivy, who has
he's an eco-terrorist, but with good reason.
Especially if you look at the old Bible that they wrote. If you look at the old Bible, that's also she was a victim of abuse and stuff like that. And Harley Quinn, who was created for the TV show.
Created for the TV show, but she's gone through it too.
Yeah, and that was the thing. These stories were being allowed to be more mature, and it made the villains more sympathetic because you start to understand that crime isn't just a black or white thing. It is a spectrum of reasons for why people do what they do to survive.
Yeah. Speaking of some of these characters though, the X-Men, they were introduced more in the Bronze Age, but they really came out in popularity, and Marvel was strapped for cash and sold them and Spider-Man to Sony. And
yeah,
we don't have to talk about the Sony cinematic universe, right? We could
yeah, well, but we can at least mention that Marvel's going bankrupt. They were constantly on the verge of being shut down entirely. And to make ends meet, they sold their properties, everything. That's the reason why we got Howard the Duck the movie.
Yeah.
And yeah, X-Men went to Fox, Spider-Man went to Sony, Hulk went to Universal. The other characters kind of were in limbo because a lot of their stories never got done properly. It was a mess. It was not a good time, and Marvel struggled, and it's possibly thanks to X-Men the animated series and Spider-Man the animated series in the early 90s that helped revive the brand.
Yeah, I will say that the cinematic universes, like the TV universes, like all of it has had like a lot of really, really rough starts. But I do think that it's very cool that you can be very, like, you could be pretty well versed in a lot of the stories that our heroes have gone through by, watching the movies. Even Iron Man 3 and the Extremis saga that I hate so much. You
We
can
know.
get that from the movies.
To be fair, it
So
was better told in the comics, but yeah, the modern
the book was
com-
better, really.
but yeah, it's like thanks to stories being adapted, thanks to unfortunately the Marvel selling other properties random things, we got stuff like Blade, we got stuff like the X-Men. DC unfortunately was kind of struggling during this era because we'd got the Tim Burton movies in the early 80s or in the late 80s, and we'd gotten the Christopher Reeve movies of Superman.
Hmm.
But both of them kind of struggled after a certain point because Superman was considered not cool enough,
Yeah.
and Batman just kind of crashed and burned to various opinions of degree after they kicked Tim Burton off the franchise.
Val
But
Kilmer was a perfectly functional Batman, but if they want to create a cinematic universe, if you change it up, if there are 3 Batmans and 4 Batman movies, it's hard to follow.
yeah, but Batman. Oh, but yeah, it's like the DC was struggling. Marvel though, they got Spider-Man, they had Blade, they had the X-Men. They were restarting people's love of superhero movies. Then it kind of died for a bit because it came in waves. And
And there are
then,
some terrible superhero movies that were out there, and
yeah.
it's really difficult to try to convince anybody that they were good. But, I will say that the casting of Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark was very inspired in many ways because of the fact that, like, RDJ had such his own sort of, fractious path kind of thing. So being able to portray him in such a very, like, it feels very just like true to life kind of way
Well,
that it
yeah, I
was
mean, I think that's part of the reason why he did so well as Tony Stark because he could relate with that self-destruction and stuff like that.
yeah.
And it's thanks to him and his performance because a lot of people were like, I don't know who Iron Man is. He was literally considered a C-level character at that point, B at the most,
Also,
because
look at like the original Iron Man, like the Mark 1 thing. He looks like a tin can. It's
yeah,
very, that's a goofy character.
yeah, but it was like he was a much lesser known character for the general population and stuff like that. And it's largely thanks to Robert Downey Jr.'s performance that the MCU actually had a chance.
Yeah.
Because him, then Chris Hemsworth as Thor, Steve Rogers as Chris Evans as Captain America.
I was just saying, like Steve Rogers as Captain America. Wow, Chris
Yeah,
Evans
yeah,
has a name, sir.
yeah, America's ass. But
Yes.
yeah, it's like and the thing was, they did what DC had been afraid to do for a while, ever since Superman ended. Embrace the absurdity of the characters,
Yes.
because they kept a lot of the comic companies kept trying to keep it straight. That was the problem. X-Men, for example, were afraid to do the crazy stories. They were afraid to do the Cosmic Phoenix saga as it was. Instead, it was Jean Grey's split personality disorder. They were afraid to, do Apocalypse as this, ancient Egyptian monster sort of thing. It wasn't
They're
until
afraid to give us Scott and Logan and Jean in an established triad.
to be fair,
Cowards!
to be fair, that didn't happen until after the Fox movies ended. So
Cowards!
they didn't know it was an option at the time.
They should have done something about it. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah,
But
well,
either way, we have
I think you're
gone.
expecting too much from from 200 or 2000s.
You know what? I am expecting a lot from the 2000s. That's fair. But I am interested to see what it is that we have with this new DC cinematic universe. And of course, the Marvel cinematic universe is on its way to the whole next phase. So, let's see if Robert Downey Jr. is able to pull them out of the kind of skit that they're in again. So we're going to take a quick break and then we'll be back to talk about the week ahead. Hi, welcome back. So, the week ahead is going to be a bit of a busy one in the DC and Marvel universes. But wait, how do you know? Well, DC Comics put out a whole calendar with canon dates for all kinds of birthdays and events, and Marvel put out a week-by-week look back for their 80th anniversary. So some of the things that are coming up this week: in 2000, the Century made its first appearance in Century #1. So I guess spoilers for Thunderbolts. In 1992, Is the Living Vampire debuted. It's been Morbid time for 33 years.
I hate you.
Well, I will remind you, though, that in 2011, we did have Captain America, the first Avenger, debuting in theaters.
Yes.
Our opportunity to see America's ass and no longer think about Johnny Storm, which admittedly is how it is that he ended up in the void.
I don't know about you, but I'm still thinking about Johnny Storm.
Yeah, I am
in
too.
that
I was
hot
trying
tub made
to be
of
cool
ice.
about it.
He spent a lot of time walking around half naked. I think about that regularly.
So, okay. Well, are there any premieres this week that are happening that you are excited about?
As a matter of fact, there is. So, I have been lucky enough to get invited by my friend Jason, aka Nerd Alert Cosplay. Follow him on socials. He does amazing builds. But he was invited to the Fantastic Four premiere that is happening on Monday, July 21st. And I will be joining
2 days
him
after this drops.
Yep, and I will be joining him for the premiere. He's going to be dressed up as Mr. Fantastic, and I will be dressed up as his son, Franklin Richards.
Okay, so you're just like, you can be daddy, and that's fine, but I'm actually going to have all of the phenomenal cosmic power. Got it.
Yeah, that's essentially.
This is how you flex on your friends. I get it. I'm 100% behind this.
And fingers crossed we get close enough to the wall that we can say hi to Pedro Pascal and actually have him call himself daddy for us.
Pedro Pascal, I'm going to be in my bug, actually, because...
Oh, let's finish this first.
Oh, yes, no, that's right.
Keep it together.
Whoops, sorry, my bad. Unfortunately, listeners, we have, in fact, though, come to the end of our podcast. And I know, you're clearly devastated about it. How could this possibly be over so soon? Well, good news! Our next episode is coming out in a week. You are also, of course, more than welcome to listen to this episode again, if that's not fast enough.
Or our other ones.
We have several of them. Get ready. For our next episode, though, it's going to be about the Scarlet Witch. I'm sorry, did I say our next episode? I mean a double episode. The next 2 weeks are going to be all about...
cannot be contained to a single episode.
That lady is a lot. That lady
she is
a lot.
Well, nerd cred takes time to build.
Yes, but much like training a Kryptonian puppy, if you actually work at it and spend some time on it, maybe you won't necessarily have the dog jump on you and accidentally knock your head into the ground and kind of I love that puppy. He's so cute. I want him to be
He's still a good dog. He's just super happy.
He's such a cuddle butto. Yes, but it is probably a good time to mention that we have an Instagram at Up Your Nerd Cred Pod.
And we're on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, and working to expand our reach. If you have a burning question that you want us to discuss so you can up your nerd cred, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us comments, and if we pick your question, we'll shout you out at the discussion segment.
Also, please make sure to get your friends to like and subscribe to the pod, and your family members and your coworkers who you trust not to be weird about listening to the same podcast as you, and that person on the bus
and
actually.
Good night, everybody.
Ba